Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We're just going to wait 2 minutes to get all the participants in, and we should be starting in a minute. But first, let me welcome Bikram. Bikram, thank you so much for doing this. I know these are crazy, crazy times, and you're astonishingly busy in the front lines. And I was so glad to have you with us. And it's a pleasure that you're able to make this at this time. And I'm really looking forward to all the questions from the audience as well.
Adi, thank you so much for having me on the chat. It's always a pleasure to interact and do this with you. In fact, if I remember correctly, the last time we did this, the roles were reversed.
Yes.
It was the Taj. I think it was 2015.
2015, we first kicked off those entire list of webinars. And,
Yeah.
and for those in the audience, I'll cover a bit of that history. So at least you have the context of the inside joke.
Yeah, so it's always a pleasure.
Brilliant. Welcome, everybody. I'm seeing, people are all logging in. Quick housekeeping rules. We want this to be interactive, and Bikram has kindly agreed not to sit and give a long PowerPoint presentation. If you all see, you have a Q&A button in your Zoom, and you can click on that, and you can ask questions throughout, either pre-questions now. You can put them throughout the conversation, and Bikram and I will keep trying to sort of get them in. My apologies, we won't be able to use the raise hand feature, quite frankly, but what we will be able to do is to answer your questions. And Bikram, I am going to request you that if you have a lot of questions, if you can extend this by 5-10 minutes. We had a great webinar with Ashutosh Gupta a couple of days ago, country manager of LinkedIn, and we were flooded with questions, and he stayed for a good extra 15 minutes. We could get to some of the exciting parts. Now, I'm just going to start off with just giving everybody a little bit of context. Bikram became the president of Gofers, 6 months ago, was it?
Yes, it was September 2019.
Brilliant timing, eh? You walk in and the biggest crisis they could ever face comes in on day one, right? And but Gofers has been doing incredibly well, as you know. So for people joining us from around the world, I mean, part of it is Gofers, one of the largest grocers in the country, soon to be the largest, I believe, with the numbers going up. It's present in 26 cities. They have 45 warehouses, and they fulfill 25 lakh orders. There's about 2.5 million orders a month, and that has been increasing at a dramatic pace. Now, one of the big reasons why we wanted to get Bikram, and Bikram, by the way, is a CII Delhi Council member as well. Great to have you there, Bikram. And so really try to understand what's happening on the ground. I know we've had a lot of questions on, are deliveries happening, about safety, about issues, but even more really understanding the agriculture, availability, supply chains. And so although, Bikram is from Gofers, we are going to try to expand this out to a larger context. And I think what I love is that he's coming in for 6 months, so he still has an insider perspective. And I think that is extremely, extremely valuable. Bikram, just to start off with, how are things going? I mean, it's been a crazy couple of weeks. How are you guys coping? What have
it has, Adi.
Challenges?
So it has. It's been, I think the last 10 days have been unprecedented. These are uncharted waters for everybody. And very honestly, I don't think there is a right answer to any situation. I think everybody is trying to land what is the most optimal answer given what situation now exists in front of us. So yes, crazy times. The government's obviously done the right thing by locking down the country. I think that was the most imperative thing to do. That was the most important thing to do. And now the government's, opening up services, keeping in mind, citizen issues, citizen comforts, industry, etc. So it has been a challenging 10 days. Having said that, a couple of issues. So the day the lockdown happened, because we work very closely with our suppliers, we actually between 8 o'clock and 12 o'clock in the night, the time the Prime Minister, the Honorable Prime Minister, addressed the country, we moved a lot of inventory into our warehouses because we saw the situation changing where for the next couple of days things were going to be tight. Even with that, though, for the first 1 or 2 days, people weren't allowed on the roads. Deliveries were constrained.
Absolutely
People
right.
weren't coming into warehouses.
I saw those incredible images of delivery drivers being chased down by police, by everybody, and some of it was heartening. Good, at least they're trying to keep the lockdown. But I was saying, hey, that could be my delivery. you know.
But I think it's settled. It took about a day or two. The authorities have now streamlined stuff. Passes have been issued. Warehouses are up and running. Although capacities are not still up. So we've had to adapt to the situation. So, for example, on our we can do only a certain number of deliveries a day, and hence we only open up the app for a certain amount of time, and we take orders for that amount of time, and then we shut down.
Now,
And
why is
we're
that? I
doing a
mean,
promise
is
time
it?
of 4 days now. So we say we'll get you your groceries and then.
Bikram, why is that? I mean, is it because just the availability of delivery partners and passes? I mean, that's the biggest restriction, or are we seeing even on the supply side, there's still a little bit of time, in making sure that you can fulfill the entire ask?
See, it's a multitude of things. One is, of course, supplies are still trickling in.
Right.
It's much better than what it was before, but it's also labor at warehouses. Once the shutdown happened, people are scared to come back. There's societal pressure, there's parental pressure.
Right.
Going. Although at the warehouses, that's what we're getting out there with the district administration. We're convincing people. We're running thermal scanners. There's social distancing happening. Everything's being sanitized, including devices. Crates are being washed. People need to wear masks, gloves. So we're doing everything that's set out as per international standards to run these warehouses. But that's getting people back into the warehouses is taking time. And then, of course, last mile delivery. It kind of gets constrained and disrupted based on the interpretation of the administrator or the local police person of 144 and everything that's coming in terms of documentation.
Right, absolutely.
So a multitude of things is causing that.
No, but you know what? I'm just glad you guys are still open. I mean, I won't name them, but there are a couple of very large e-commerce companies which just threw up their hands and said, you know what, forget it. We're not even going to bother trying to do it because the logistics of this is too difficult. And they've just shut it down for 2 months or 3 months, or at least until 15th April, until they can figure this out. And so kudos for even trying to make sure that, things are up and running. I mean, it's an incredible story. I still remember you and I having a conversation a week ago, and from our side in the pharmaceutical sector, we were like, my God, how do we get medicines to people coming to the warehouse? And I think within a 24 hours, 48 hours, you guys were able to sort through a lot of those problems very quickly and start the delivery, start getting people out.
Absolutely. We see this as an opportunity to meaningfully serve the country, and this isn't positioning, but we at Gofers really thought that this was a great opportunity to get out there and do what we thought was important for the country. So if you look at it, a lot of people talk about this as an opportunity for the e-commerce e-groceries company, but what we are doing is so for example, in a normal world, we sell about 3,000 or 4,000 SKUs. We brought it down to about 500 SKUs. We're saying we're only going to sell essentials. This isn't an opportunity to try and reap money from customers. Even within those 500 SKUs, we've set limits so people don't hoard. So, for example, if you try and buy atta, you can't buy more than 110 kg of atta.
So you can't say, oh, you know what?
You can't.
Gofers is the low-cost guys. Let me get them to give me like a ton of atta, and I'm just going to sit on it and distribute.
Exactly. Right. We've stopped all promotion codes, for example. We're not allowing people to use promotion codes because that, again, kind of incentivizes hoarding. So we've seen this as an opportunity to actually try and bring normalization to customers and their lives.
No, now I know Grofers doesn't deal with fresh vegetables or fresh meat, right? It's a lot of essential items right now. Dal, atta, flour. Just the 500 basic SKUs. Now, obviously, a lot of this is dependent on your suppliers, and we have a bunch of questions. For example, Pankaj Saluja is asking, how are you managing the inventory levels? How are you ensuring there is enough inventory, even of these 500 SKUs across warehouses? Just talk about a little bit of how that scenario changed, particularly perhaps, when, black swan events being black swan events, suppliers aren't ready to even handle this.
Yep. So, every if you look at the retail space, there's this fundamental concept of days of inventory and days of credit, right? Typically, your days of inventory have to be lesser than have to be more than your days of credit for you to make money,
Right.
right? So, we work, across the retail industry, the days of inventory typically in the offline space is about 30 plus days. Uh, we work on a day because we are e-commerce and we work, we use technology significantly more than any of the offline companies. We work on a days of, a DOI of about 17 to 18 days.
Wow.
And even within that, we actually buffer for one cycle of zero fill rates. So what that means is that even if I miss a fill, on Monday, I buffer for that to ensure that the next time the supplier is giving me goods, I'm still being able to cater to customer demand.
So you're over ordering on inventory because
Yeah.
so increase the inventory days just by a little bit, because you know that if you order now, if you'll get it, you'll at least be able to smoothen that curve for the next week or two, right?
Absolutely. So first is, being close to your suppliers using technology. Secondly, sourcing through multiple vendors and not being dependent on one supplier. But even within the warehouse, so one of the advantages of, bringing down the number of SKUs has been that we are able to inbound faster, right? So if
Right.
there is
So instead of
a
bottling
cut
about
of
3,000 SKUs, right? You sort
yes,
of go down. And has that happened to your supplier list also? That you have to say, look, these are the guys who are able to consistently supply.
yes, it has. So we are, working with a certain set of suppliers, and we brought down that list. We also have a private label, which is, the Grofer brands, and that's about 35% out of our business. So we've ramped up manufacturing there significantly, and we're trying to ensure that any shortage of supplies that's coming from the national brands, the large brands, we're being able to, kind of supplement with our private labels as well. So that's broadly some of the things that we're doing there.
Now, talking about this private label part, right? Because I remember in an earlier conversation we had, that was still not it was a significant part, right? But that is something that, as you mentioned, you have control over. How has that helped? Having your own private label, being able to at least say, look, we control part of the supply chain internally.
See, the very essence of a private label is about the fact that you're able to provide equivalent or better quality at cheaper prices.
Right.
That's the thought process behind having a private label, because you don't have distribution channels that you need to feed. You're directly picking up from the manufacturer, and you're able to, sell to consumers off the platform. Conceptually, a private label makes a lot of sense and almost all retailers have their own private labels. However, the percentage varies. Most, private labels for retailers who are general retailers, especially in India, private labels anything between 10 to 20%. Our private label sits. So we've got about 35% there in terms of private label, and we're quite heavy on staples. So atta, dal, like for example, for atta, we're the largest buyer for atta in North India.
Wow.
So
For
we have
North
our own.
India, that's a lot. I mean, and North Indians love their flour. That's a huge thing, right?
So
It's a very heavy flour centric area.
absolutely. So it's been a pivotal part of our strategy all along. We've grown our private label well. It's also a higher margin business, to be honest. But yes, in times like this, having direct control with manufacturers, supplies, because you don't have to fight for that, 5 bottles of sanitizer coming your way
Right,
versus
right,
that
right.
going to an alternate retailer.
Now,
Uh,
Vikram, I have a question from Sabina. Now, I know you guys don't deal beyond the manufacturers right now, but and and feel free not to answer this if you don't have the data, but are you seeing any disruptions? For example, you mentioned dal and atta, right? Are the people who are supplying you, they're getting it from farmers? There's no issue there right now, or apart from mild disruptions, maybe, or would you put that as maybe a risk if this continues for 2-3 months?
See, typically in commodity buying, you don't pick up 10-day supplies. You hedge for a longer period of time. So raw material is picked up, in bulk for a longer cycle. So I would say for the moment, no, because the raw material for the produce right now has been picked up, keeping in mind, 2-3 months supplies.
So there's a lot of inventory in the system still.
There would be,
People
yes.
are very comfortable, right?
I think so, yes. I think so, yes. But yes, if the situation was to be the same for the next 6 months or 4 months, then I think we will start seeing challenges.
So I'm going to pivot to a bit. I think Sabina has asked this. I think Rahul Manchanda has asked this as well. Just on looking at, how's the government been? I mean, obviously, with so many states, you have to lot of state governments. Everybody has been implementing various policies internally. They have been taking national policies and sort of implementing them. And of course, the first 2-3 days, it was a mess for everybody. I was there, you were there, everything is going all over the place. But now that things have started to get a little bit more regularized, if not normalized, how are the states government acting? I mean, are they now easier to talk to? Have their processes there? Any experiences you'd like to share where you got a lot of support?
Yes, and again, like I said, unprecedented times. So I think the government did the right thing by locking down everything and then starting to open. So I think that was the right thing to do, especially in a country like India, where discipline sometimes can be a challenge.
Absolutely. I still remember turning on TV and then watching the dandiya parties with on the self-isolation day. That was amazing.
Yes, so I think the government's done the right thing. In terms of support at the center, at this state level, district level, there's huge amount of support. I think the best part of coming out of this, the silver lining, is that how people are coming together, how governments are coming together. We always talk about inefficiencies in the government, etc. I can tell you, the intent is really high. To solve problems, to serve the people. I can give you so many examples. Couple of state governments, in fact, have started giving advertisements in newspapers on our behalf. They have us there, and they have a couple of other retailers there saying you can order your e-groceries from here. Don't step out of the house. We're working with the Gurgaon administration, for example. And this isn't a Gofers, ordering service. This is just, if you need food delivered to your residence, call this helpline. And we've set it up for them, and we are delivering, and not as Gofers, but just as a part of Gurgaon administration. So I would say the intent is huge. There's a lot of selfless work that's happening by people in the government, and I truly appreciate what's happening there right now.
Fantastic. Guys, by the way, people who are just tuning in, love to have you here. Please use the Q&A section. It's in your Zoom, whether using from your mobile or from a camera on your laptop. Please click the Q&A. That's how we get your Q&A in a structured manner. Otherwise, I am seeing a lot of people posting it in the chat, but it's very hard for us to follow and to do it. So if you could just put all your questions in the Q&A. I have Tanya Aurora who's sort of asking, and maybe just kind of context. So I think a lot of people here have been Gofers customers. A lot of them have not been. What is Gofers' USP? I mean, pre-COVID, in terms of compared to other e-commerce, e-grocers. It's just a little bit idea of your target audience and market, so we understand who your customers are. Because 2.5 million deliveries per month is a lot, and then I'm going to pick your brain on now what happens afterwards.
So our core value is helping customers save money in their everyday purchases.
So you're not a luxury grocery store. So I can't order French caviar or Russian caviar or some crazy stuff, right?
No.
Okay, good.
We're a everyday low price platform. Think of us as a Trader's Joe in the US, a discounter. We will get you the sharpest prices for your brands, and we do that by ensuring that we're turning around what we call products or SKUs much faster because we buy in bulk. Negotiate brand, and of course no distribution channels in the middle. So we are an everyday low price platform. That is our USP, who delivers to your house in the most convenient way.
Brilliant. No, I'm just going to kind of push on this to a little bit on more of the nuts and bolts. I think a number of people are asking, um, you know, uh, you talked briefly about how you're able to implement best international standards quickly in warehouses. Social distancing, multiple hygiene cleanings, etc. One of the big things that a lot of consumers have been worried about is that, okay, I'm sitting at home, I'm in quarantine, right? Everything is great. I see this newspaper ad, call Gofers a sector for your groceries. I call them, but now I'm worried that what if COVID is hanging on the parcel that is being delivered, right? Or inside the box, etc. Now I know, and of course, that there is a good studies on the materials and how long this virus can last on these materials, and they're very encouraging. So it's not that they last forever; there's a limited period. But what are some of the precautions that you're being able to take there? Because I know a lot of, for example, people refuse to accept their daily newspaper now, because they're so worried they'll pick up the newspaper and Sunday they'll get COVID. Now, pragmatically, I don't think that really happens. But would love to understand what you're doing in terms of just the basics.
Yeah, so Adi, you broke in the middle, but I presume the question was, what are we doing to ensure that, what precautions are we taking on supplies to ensure that material which is being delivered is COVID-free?
Exactly. Perfect.
That was the question.
My 2-minute question in one sentence.
Yeah. So I think there are various stages to getting goods to a consumer. Stage number one is the warehouse. When goods are coming into the warehouse. At that point in time, we're ensuring that anybody who's walking into our warehouse is temperature scanned. So we have thermal scanners up there, gloves, masks, employees are maintaining distance. We have concepts of what we call warehouse within warehouse. So within a large warehouse, we will, set up multiple warehouses. That means all the SKUs are present in that one warehouse and then multiple such replicas. We are strongly quarantining teams between these warehouses. So if at one point in time, somebody does unfortunately come up with symptoms, we don't have to, quarantine the whole warehouse employee base. You can fumigate the warehouse and then you can open up, and only the people who've been in that particular sub warehouse need to be quarantined. We are disinfecting all machines. We are disinfecting handheld devices. Every time, every couple of hours, those are being crates are after every use. So we're taking utmost care at our warehouse to ensure that the goods that are getting to customers are not touched. So that's one part of it, by anybody, not touched by anybody who who may do it in a unsupervised manner. Then comes the distribution points, because those goods are then got to the distribution points where orders are all set up. Now, at those distribution points, we are making sure that we are segregating the people who are delivering versus the people who are there manning those distribution points.
Fantastic. So you have
and the people who are coming to pick up the orders. So there is physical separation there to ensure that there is no mixing or intermingling of people there. And then we have the delivery boys who are coming in. They're carrying sanitizers, masks, gloves. That's an essential part of their kit. And they are taking those materials. Sorry, Ali, my connection's probably not good, but I missed the last part of what you said.
No, go ahead. I was just making a general comment, please.
Yes, so they're carrying the kit, and then they bring these orders to the consumer's house. Now, within that, we've also introduced a new service. We actually built the tech for it over the last 1 week. It's called Zero Touch Deliveries, where you do not interact, or the guy who's delivering your orders to you does not touch the order. So we're doing containerization, and we are delivering it as zero touch deliveries. So we're doing a number of things along the line to ensure that goods, do not get contaminated. Having said that, my advice to all consumers is, and I'm doing this myself, is that when you're inverting goods into your house, make sure that you're kind of either washing them with soap water or sanitizing them in some way, because they could come contaminated from even before they enter the warehouse, right? And we are
So,
turning things around.
and so all this means, maybe take a little bit of, Dettol or something, put on a tissue and just wipe it down, right? I mean, it's not that I have to send my packet of dal or etc. to this entire, professional cleaning service. It's just, just
Yes, I mean,
just the basics, right?
Basic hygiene.
One
Yes.
would argue we should have done that before COVID. In any case, for anything we buy, right? Before it enters your house, just a little bit of wipe down, right? I have Pranav.
Yeah, I mean, think about storage at Kirana shops. Sorry, think about storage at Kirana shops. I mean, if you go into those godowns, you have rats and all kinds of creatures running over those goods. So it is basic hygiene you should be exercising anytime goods are coming to your house.
No, makes a lot of sense. I mean, I certainly have been a lot more aware of that now, even for normal e-commerce deliveries. Just take a little of a wipe down the edges, and wash your hands. Very common sense. And what my hope is that post COVID-19, this behavior becomes normal. I think there's so many diseases, communicable diseases in India that we could prevent if we took a lot more hygiene standards to heart, both in our homes and in our offices. And I really hope, in 6 months' time, we can actually say, hey, guess what? Compared to last year, not only did we manage this COVID-19 case, but a lot of the other diseases, right? Whether it's a dengue or a malaria or all these other stuff, or even a tuberculosis, which kills, 1,300 people a day in India, we've managed to make some steps there. Now, I have Pranav Mukul from the Indian Express. Hey, Pranav, good to have you here. Here's a couple of questions. One, and you covered this a little bit earlier, but just perhaps some more color and detail around it. Every industry is facing a labor shortage, right? Here is mass exodus of migrant labor, a lot of tough time convincing them, as you had said earlier, their families said, no, come back. This is not worth it. The Prime Minister said this is a time to self-isolate, and that family pressure is there. And how are you working through those challenges? And the second part of his question is that, are you able to onboard
I'm sorry,
people who have lost their jobs? Bikram, just waiting for you to get back to us. Just, I think 2 seconds hard on that. Bikram, can you hear me now?
I can, yes. Sorry, I missed the question. I think the one thing that's suffering is internet services because everybody's staying at home.
Not a problem. One, how are you dealing with the labor shortages? And two, are you able to onboard a labor who has lost their jobs from other sectors into Gofers, apparently as part of a program you guys may have announced?
Yes, actually, I spoke about it on TV a couple of days ago, and which is where I think Pranav may have picked that from. Firstly, yes, is there labor shortage? There is, like I said before, there is societal pressure. See, most of the labor that we used comes from warehouses, around our warehouses. So it's not really unskilled labor. This is skilled labor because they have to operate machines, devices, and things like that. So I think the bigger challenge is getting people to, understand better that the warehouses are safe. It's all good. They can come and work. And we're using the district administration to help us with that, to go into villages and talk to the people and help them understand that. But even with that, given the surge we've seen on demand, demand's gone up 2x on the platform.
Right.
We're seeing obviously a huge surge. So we need more people because you need more people to pick material, you need more people to pack material and dispatch it and things like that. So we've hired about 2,500 people over the last week or so. And a lot of those people are actually coming from affiliate or associate industries. So for example, about 5 days ago, we had about 150 people who were from the garment industry, who have been displaced because of the closure. And we took them in, we trained them for a day and a half, where we ran them through all the trainings. Now, because they come from the government space, they know how to run warehouses, they know how to run, machines. packing machines and things like that. So we picked up about 3 people and we've lots talked about. But yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for us to help some of the other industries who are not as fortunate as us to be working in this crisis.
Brilliant, Bikram. Now, I have Ritikar Vijay who asked us a while ago, when are we going to see robots uh, from Gofers running across the street trying to deliver stuff? I mean, we've all seen those videos from Wuhan, China, right? These isolationist robots going through hospitals. Now, I don't know if they actually work on a larger scale, but is there a strategic plan for when we start using robots, or that's just still too far away?
I think it's a little far away simply because economics, unit economics in India are very different from Western countries. Um, if you look at delivery charges, see, anything comes at a cost, right? And especially when you're a low price platform, um, it's the economics need to make sense. From our perspective, most of our tech is spent in areas which kind of improves the service for our customers. So a lot of it is spent on our supply chains because and on the app, because that's where we think we can improve the consumer experience. Having a robot deliver versus a human deliver, um, I'm not sure how much of a difference in experience that will make for the consumer. Yes, it will fasten things up for us. But from consumer experience perspective, perhaps there are bigger problems to solve on supply chain and the on the app.
I can completely understand. Maybe have a couple of questions here from Rachna, and again one from Atanya. How are you able to so the first part is employees. Now, what are some of the techniques you're using to motivate employees? Obviously, they're also scared. Obviously, this is for them entirely new. How are you keeping them engaged? How are you keeping spirits up?
Yeah, so the first thing is convincing them that it's safe to come back. So that is the number one item on our agenda, safety of our employees. So making sure that whatever is happening at the warehouse is ensuring that anybody who's coming in there at the distribution points, our delivery fleet, making sure that they're safe. So for example, cash on demand is cash on delivery, sorry, is a significant portion of our orders.
By the way, we have a lot of questions on that, so please do cover that as well.
Yeah, it's a large proportion of our orders, but we've shut it down simply because it's endangering, I think, both sides, customers as well as the people who are receiving cash or giving cash, because there is a physical exchange then that's happening. The goods are coming in containers, so there is no touch there. The guys wearing gloves. But the minute you're taking cash and giving cash, then that person has to go and deposit that cash, in a branch or a bank or something. So we've stopped that at the cost of business. So making sure that the employees are safe is the number one criteria that we're using to come out of this crisis. But more than that, I think it's just the mind process, the thought process, and how people are perceiving this. A lot of people are seeing this as an opportunity to serve, like I said before, to serve the nation. Come to the front lines and deliver when it counts. So we're trying to ensure that spirit is being instilled in everybody who's out there in the front lines, working and delivering to customers.
Vikram, we have a few people. I think Prasad, Shriram, and I'm getting one more person who had asked this. But post COVID, I mean, one of the interesting part is a lot of people who you're getting today are new customers, right? People who have never been a Gofers customer earlier. Do you expect a change in consumer behavior after this? Do you, if you've gained 5,000 new customers, how many of do you have a thought that how many will say, look, this is the way I want to get my groceries in the future? Or do you see this as just a blip and maybe only 5-10% will actually stay?
We think a huge percentage will stay, simply because I think it's a significant opportunity for people to experience a better way of buying goods. They're cheaper when you buy them online. Having said that, that may not hold true in entirety across the e-commerce chain right now. But even if I move away from prices, the basic concept of having your goods stored, delivered, managed, handled, and delivered to you in a hygienic way into the four walls of your house, the convenience of that. Frankly, that should be the new normal. That is how people should be buying. And I think once people discover that over the next few weeks or months, we expect a number of customers to stay back. So the post-COVID world, we think, is going to be very different from the pre-COVID world. You know, buying groceries by stepping out and going to your local kirana guy or your even large supermarket, which is tens of kilometers away from your house, may not be the preferred mode of transacting in the future.
Brilliant. We have Prakash M who sort of who's asked a very interesting question. And again, I know some of this is proprietary data, so answer what you can. Now, are there any interesting trends that you are seeing in in what people are buying? Sudden, pre-COVID, post-COVID, suddenly, you're seeing a couple of things that are just flying off the shelves. Bikram, did you get the question?
Yeah, Adi, I'm sorry, I've lost.
No, I will re-ask the question. Do you see anything that is suddenly flying off the shelves? Post-COVID, obviously you have the hand sanitizers and this and that and everything that expected, but a couple of unexpected things that are suddenly everybody's buying. I think we're going to wait a couple of seconds for Bikram to come back. Bikram, can you hear me now?
I can now, Adi. I can now. I'm so sorry. The connection just sucks. Sorry about this, but
yeah, no. Again, some interesting things that are not that are essentials that people are now buying that they weren't buying before COVID. Now, obviously, we have the hand sanitizers and this and that, but what else are they buying?
So one is, of course, what the government is calling essential goods, and that definition is expanding by the day. We've already seen a few iterations there. Besides sanitizers and hand wash, I think cleaning agents, shampoos, etc., are now coming in. So if you look at grocery buying, it typically goes into four categories. There's staples, which is dal, atta, chawal, what you need to buy. There's FMCG food, which is packaged goods, things like ketchup, jam, Maggi, etc. FMCG non-food, things like shampoo, soap, toothpaste. And lastly, what you call general merchandise. So, pots and pans and mirrors and knives. And now within each category, you're going to find essentials. You can't do without shampoo for a 30-day lockdown or a 21-day lockdown. You can't do without, detergent for washing your clothes. You need knives in your kitchen. You are going to need toothpaste. You are going to need, shampoo and soap, like I said. Even within FMCG food, jam, ketchup, Maggi, that's the people in the tech world that I'm aware of. So, the definition of essentials is growing by the day. And as this lockdown, continues, we're already in day 10, and as it goes to day 21, we're seeing people growing that list. So it's no longer about atta, dal, chawal. People are buying lots more stuff because they realize that for the next few months, perhaps restricted movement is how life is going to be.
And talk to me about you've done this for 6 months now, and for those who don't call, Bikram used to head Amazon Web Services in India, so all the cloud computing. About 5-6 years ago, he grabbed me, and because we were, I think the number one cloud adopters in the country since 2008, 2010, and he dragged me across the country to do a bunch of keynote addresses for them, which was immensely fun. And so obviously he comes from a very, very strong technology background. And one of the things which I love that you're saying is that this entire thing about robotics, about automation, is is not so much a technology problem as much as it is just a business model. The margins aren't there to support this level of high tech stuff right now. It is far simpler to train great employees to get this out to them than have a very, very expensive robot trying to weave its way and find its way. And, the drone deliveries and stuff. One of the big things I think people would love to know is, COVID-19 Black Swan, right? Nobody expected this, etc. If you were to redesign, and not even for Gofers, for just as a general perspective, for all e-commerce companies or all technology companies, how would you look at redesigning supply chains going into the future? If the Indian government or if CII comes to you and say, hey, we need some thought leadership on how new supply chains look like, what are some of the elements that you think a post-COVID-19 supply chain should have and would look at, or even things that we should do completely differently?
See, end of the day, most of us on this call are businessmen, right? So it always comes down to unit economics. So to my mind, the supply chain, the cost per order has to support the revenue per order. Right? That's the balance that has to be established. Now, if you look at a typical grocery cart in this country, that typical average order value is about anything between 1,500 to 2,000 rupees. And grocery is typically a stock up behavior. So people will buy during the first 3 or 4 days of the month. They will stock up for the month, atta dal chawal, and then there will be a second round of buying, which is kind of a top up behavior, right? So your typical cart value would be 1,500 to 2,000 rupees, and your typical purchase in a month for an average Indian family. I'm talking about the what we call the 50,000 to 1 lakh rupee income earner families. They would typically buy about 3,000, 4,000 grocery. Now, on each cart, you would make a margin of, let's say, about 12 to 15%, which means you're typically making anything about 200 to 300 rupees on a basket. Now, your supply chain has to be less than that. So your cost per order has to be able to support a 200 rupee cost, 200 rupee revenue, right? So any supply chain that's designed has to be lean, because 200 rupees on see, when you're selling mobile phones, it's a very different world, because you're making 2,000 rupees on a mobile phone as an average, right? When you're selling garments, it's a different world. But when you sell groceries, supply chains have to be lean. Supply chains have to be extremely frugal. And everything and anything has to be invested in terms of making it better for the consumer, making it cheaper for the consumer. Look at the area. If I design this, it would clearly be about getting at the most optimum cost. So, for example, when you talk about warehouses, most warehouse management systems today are designed for e-commerce, the general merchandise, or for mobile phones, where you typically have to go and pick one item, which is one mobile phone, and maybe a charger along. You on an average about 30 to 40 orders in an hour as a pickup, versus a grocery supply chain where you have to pick 15 to 20 items in a cart. So that takes that much longer to go out there and pick up items and pack your cart, and to be able to then go bill it. So if I was to do this again, without getting into specifics, I would say my core North Star is going to be, how do I design a supply chain which is extremely lean, frugal, and I'm able to build everything for the benefit of bringing the cost down for the customer.
So what you're saying is that we'd love to do all this crazy new technology. I'd say we need 60 days of inventory, and we have to have super robust all this stuff. But at the end of the day, unless we can figure out a way to make the unit economics work,
Absolutely.
And it's all this side up. And I think that's a great thought for everybody in the audience. I think there's a lot of very interesting academic thoughts out there. There's a lot of interesting stuff where economists are telling us that, oh, the future of supply chain now looks like as having 3 different vendors for every product and multiple distribution systems and fail-safe A and fail-safe B. But all that has a cost, and hopefully unless stuff like COVID happens every couple of years, and then it just gets built into the pricing because everybody else has to do it. At the end of the day, anything you do has to make economic sense, and otherwise you can't do it. I think that's a fantastic learning from there. A lot of questions around, uh, you know, uh, what can grofers teach other people? You know, and not just in the e-grocery space, right? But other e-commerce companies, other companies who have struggled with their supply chains, who couldn't get their act together. You know, what are some of the key learnings that you could say that, you know, if you were doing a master class for them, that say, look, these are the 3-4 things that you needed to have done day one, that next time you should think about when something like this happens?
Look, I don't know how qualified we would be to teach others who are probably been in the business of e-commerce significantly longer than us. But what I can tell you is,
But Bikram, even non-e-commerce business, right? Even guys who are doing kirana supply chain stores, or who are just trying to get some products from A to B, right? I think there's a lot of learnings that have come within the first 2 weeks. Love to get some advice for them.
Well, I would say, like I said, so this is a business. If you break up the business, it's about supplies, inventory, uh, you know, picking or packing or warehouse. So if you break this up, it's essentially 3 or 4 pieces, right? And a lot of people, in the past, have built businesses around how do I profit from this, in terms of the inefficiencies in the business. I think you need to change that view. The filter has to completely change. You have to turn it upside down and say, I shouldn't be charging the highest I can charge. I should be charging the lowest I can charge. I don't know if I'm making sense on that, right? So what is the least I can charge to build this out versus the most profit I can make on it? Because in the long term, what we're seeing is that what customers value most is ensuring that you're able to supply them goods at the lowest prices in the most convenient way, right? So the one thing that's never, so what won't change post-COVID world, pre-COVID world, the only thing that's not going to change is customers telling you, hey, I love your product, I love your service, take up prices. They're always going to tell you, keep your prices low, I love your service. So I think whoever's building anything, the basic fundamental model is how much less can I charge for it? What is the minimum that I can charge from it versus what is the maximum amount of profit I can make for it? Those are two very different lenses. And I think the first lens is what is going to be very, very relevant in a post-COVID world, especially with people believing that recession has set in. Business models are going to be under huge stress. So start thinking about what's the minimum I can charge versus what's the maximum profit I can make.
We have a bunch of questions around, how this is going to change in terms of ecosystem. Now, for example, Vaibhav Agarwal has an interesting question on, so he's talking about globalization, but, I share his thing, countries have locked themselves down, right? We have closed our borders. It's almost, we have put export bans, for example, you cannot export hydrochloroquine from India to any of the countries in the world who need it because we think that's there. Similarly, a lot of countries have made similar bans on food, essential items, personal protective equipment, all of this. And there is a push by every country. I think the US has announced it, Europe has announced it, India has announced it for a lot of its APIs and things there. Do you see this as, but it's not the first time. I mean, in my own professional lifetime, in the last 20 years, we've had multiple instances where horrible stuff has happened to supply chains. And then every government and everybody starts saying that, yes, we need to be self-sufficient. We need to have essential items all manufactured in the country. We're going to come out with program A, program B, program C. But it never really happens. Do you think this is the time? Do you think now that it's a sufficient shock that governments, companies, ecosystems, people will start supporting that, maybe it's worth paying 2 rupees more, but making sure that we have local supply than always depending on foreign sources?
I think so. I think it's, and I don't want to answer on behalf of the government, but I think post-COVID, some very serious thoughts need to be put into, and not just for India. I think every country is going to need to put in some serious thought of saying, hey, are we over dependent? See, exports are not going to stop. Imports are not going to stop. Otherwise, you'll never have a global economy. But there are certain essential items on that list where if there was to be a COVID-like situation again, then how reliant or dependent are you on anything outside your borders? So I think, in my opinion, I think the governments, once they get out of this whole crisis, should sit down and give it a very serious thought to say what's within my borders and what comes from outside my borders, and what do I send outside my borders. Perhaps have a clear strategy around that.
Brilliant. We have a great question from Anil Arora, who's really looking at, and I'm going to paraphrase this question for him, but essentially this notion that everybody's gone through this massive food insecurity psychosis, right? We're locked in our houses. We should not worry about food because there's enough. I think there's enough being produced. In fact, all the restaurants and all shut down. So there's a huge glut of food that is now available because, by the way, everybody, we were wasting a lot of food. All those buffets you went to, whether it was at a wedding or at an event, all that food is now sitting in homes. So please don't worry about not there being enough food. In fact, quite frankly, I think food prices at the source have collapsed. It's about the distribution and the logistics, a lot of what we are talking about. But, we've seen that post-crisis consumer behaviors change, right? And we saw that to the 2008, 2009 crisis. We saw that, early on in the dot-com bust. We saw it post 9/11. And I'll pose an interesting question. Do you think that people, at least for a couple of years, are going to start building personal safety stocks and just say, you know what, I've been burned so badly and I was scared so badly, I'm just going to keep a personal inventory of dry groceries, like, a month worth of flour or a month worth of rice on a regular basis? Or, or you don't really think that's going to happen, and people will be like, okay, now that we have food security in 6 months, it's not going to happen.
So a couple of things. Will consumer buying it will change. Will it be stock up? I'm not sure, because frankly, I don't think we are in a situation where material isn't available. You're still getting your dal, atta, chawal through multiple channels. Milk, vegetables are still available. So we kind of did a brainstorming on this just yesterday, internally at Gofers, and we were kind of trying to be ahead of the curve and say, okay, what is consumer buying behavior going to look like 2 months, 3 months from now once this settles? And again, you can only foresee maybe 12 months to 18 months into the future because it's such a changing world. So the first thing that we see is that due to this entire black swan event, there is going to be an impact on the economy. There will be liquidity crunch. Companies are going to struggle through this. As a result, when we come out on the other side, we think consumer buying behavior is going to change. Fundamentally, a couple of things will happen. One, there is a significant segment of people who today buy for convenience. That segment is going to shift one level down because of the liquidity crunch. People who are in corporate jobs, double income, no kid families. So we think they're going to shift. There's going to be a shift one level down for most segments, right? What that really means is that people are going to start rationing purchases. So earlier, if you were buying, 2 bottles of ketchup in a month, you'd probably say, let me do with, 1 big bottle and 1 small bottle.
So what we're saying is, it's not that people are going to in fact stock up more. It's just because their purchasing power is going to take a massive hit, right? And so even if they want to purchase, so they actually might, go from a Sec A to a A- or a B+ or a B or even further. I think those are the impacts that you're seeing more than actually people saying, you know what, I am going to, spend a month's worth of salary in stocking up groceries in a pantry somewhere.
Yes. And also we think the order values are going to actually shrink. People are going to buy in smaller quantities so that liquidity stays with them.
So the entire shampoo sachet thing, which most FMCG guys have been doing, right? You can't buy a full bottle of shampoo, but you can buy a sachet. Yep. And if you push the entire country down in terms of purchasing power, you're going to see that a lot of people say, as you said, what is the cheapest way to manage my personal cash flows, rather than investing into, long stay dry goods.
Also, we think it's a huge opportunity for alternate brands, challenger brands, regional brands, private labels, because you may not, yeah, you've been used to buying the top end brand, but if you find the similar quality or better quality in a cheaper brand, you might switch. So we think it's a huge opportunity for switching brands for consumers. So it's going to be an interesting time for the whole CPG, FMCG space, where brand loyalty is going to be tested, given the liquidity issues that will come up.
Wow. So, I mean, we're not just talking about a complete change of consumer behavior in terms of being unable to afford high priced items, but I think people are going to, what you're saying, start questioning is it worth paying premium for a brand?
Yes.
Should I get my, and I know you've been using the word ketchup a lot as the interesting thing, but no, it could be shampoo, it could be noodles, it could be atta, it could be rice, it could be whatever, and say, I'm okay using a regional or a local brand which is cheaper, because at some point I do have to start saving money on the margin. Right, we have about 5-10 minutes. I want to get through a couple of more questions here as well, but I just want to sort of try to push our conversation on a post COVID-19 thing. I know we've covered a little bit of it, but are we ready for from a supply chain perspective? Are we ready if this lockdown extends for 60 days? Now I know the Prime Minister has been insistent on this being till 14th April. I know airlines have started booking tickets for 15th April. Railways have started booking tickets for 15th April. Singapore went into a lockdown this morning because of asymptomatic transmission. We're having a lot of issues that are coming up when new data about COVID-19 is coming, and that's changing. The US has pushed its lockdown till the end of April. Obviously, I don't expect you or me to make a prediction on how the Indian government will have to react to this, because they will react in an appropriate manner based on the data that they have. But if you're looking at a longer term shutdown or an intermittent shutdown, as some people are saying, we'll turn on for a week, we'll shut down for another week, or certain services will start coming in, we'll restore manufacturing, goods, supply this, and then slowly start opening things bit by bit. But do we have the supply chains for that?
Look, I think the easiest answer for me to say would be yes. But I think between now and getting to that yes, a lot has to be built out. And we have to build it like, if I was to just paraphrase it, overnight. So we have a very short time to foresee what's coming and then start building towards that. Honestly, the last 2 weeks has really been that. We've pulled out our tech teams across all projects, and we've just put them onto the supply chain side. And we're just building on a daily basis. We're putting in newer solutions. We're building, whatever customers are asking for. So when you say our supply chain is ready for it, the honest answer is we're in transition. Having said that, when a challenge is going to be thrown our way, we're going to have to solve for it. So we said zero touch deliveries, and within a couple of days, we had a zero touch delivery supply chain option ready. So I think along with the challenges that come our way, the opportunity is huge. It's because I can tell you the efficiencies that are coming out of teams, the productivity that are coming out of teams are way higher than what we saw in pre-COVID times.
and I'll be honest with you, we have about 5,000 employees at our end strewn all over the world, right? And some of them have had 2x, 3x productivity, because suddenly they're focused on real urgent problems they have to solve, right?
I mean, even working from home, you're working 7 days a week, and you're working way longer than what you'd be doing.
Those interesting reminders that on LinkedIn, today is Sunday, by the way. but I think, and for the audience, I mean, this is something which I've said, crises are times where, a reputation of a firm and a reputation of a person is made, right? Mm-hmm. Or broken, right? And I think what I'm loving, and we're seeing this across companies, is that people are taking this in stride and saying, this is a time of crisis. I need to contribute to my company, to my society, to my community. And if that means working 24/7, that means working 24/7, because that's what we need to get done in order to make sure that essential supply chains are working. People are getting their bare essentials. And I think it's a huge congratulations to the entire of corporate India and a lot of you professionals and businessmen who are working in there, who are really rising to the challenge into trying to put the lights on 24 hours. Absolutely. But Bikram, I have a couple of very interesting questions. What are the opportunities that this COVID-19 opened? I have a very interesting questions, or of somebody who wants to pivot. I'm trying to find the gentleman's name on my question list, but who's asked, where are the opportunities? Are we seeing, for example, in HR, suddenly a lot more need for supply chain professionals, or suddenly a huge need for auditors or healthcare workers, or even in terms of new companies? Are you seeing any opportunities, low-hanging fruits that you can immediately see that, okay, post COVID-19, these are places which will provide new avenues for business or for employment?
See, we have to be mindful that we as human beings have short memories. So yes, for the next 6 months, a lot will be done. People will try and create business opportunities out of the situation. But fundamentally, there will be a few things that will stay, a lot will go away, till the next crisis comes, and then we scramble back into our burrow holes to try and figure out, how do you solve? So, what we think will stay, and I'm going to try and keep it specific to, the FMCG, CPG kind of space, because that's the space that we are kind of now, brainstorming around. So I think a couple of things will change. One, technology is going to be used way higher than what it's been used till now, in terms of trying to solve for problems using things like artificial intelligence, IoT, machine learning. All of these are going to be used to develop solutions which allow you to do contactless, touchless, hygiene, safety. Because if you think of a consumer who's been through this, three things are going to stay with that customer post this thing. The first is low prices because of the economic situation. The second is going to be brand trust. You're going to buy into things which you trust. And third is going to be hygiene. The people who are handing those things over to you, whether in a kirana shop or an e-commerce delivery chain, you don't want them to be sniffling their nose and then touching your packets and touching your fruit and things like that. That awareness is going to go up significantly. So I think technology to build solutions which are in the space of minimal human interaction, touch, are going to pick up. So I think that's going to be a space that we will see significant opportunity around. Healthcare, of course, there's going to be a massive opportunity around healthcare. I'm on a couple of groups around investment and PEs and VCs, and even in these gloomy times, I'm seeing people trying to raise money for healthcare and pharma kind of startups. So that's obviously going to be a huge opportunity. And in third, I think is just the whole supply chain side, like you said. There's a significant opportunity there. I think there's just huge amount of disruption that can happen. There is so much inefficiency in that whole, if I was to say, general trade, the way it runs between distributors, stockists.
All of it needs to be redone, right? Because and there's been a huge amount, and I think that's just been exposed right now.
Yes.
Right. I think a lot of people have to rethink that and say, look, maybe there is a better way. Maybe there's a more robust way.
Yep. So I think there's going to be definite opportunity. I think private labels are going to be big because you want to work with manufacturers, directly. So I think most retailers are going to get into private labels if they're not already there, and expand that.
So, I had a very good question I think from Media Nama, Aditya, there on this. And, I should have asked this a little bit earlier, not towards the end of it. But, is there a conflict between private labels and the way e-commerce is set up in India, or do you think that has been solved for the most part?
I don't think there's a conflict. I think there is, if you look at any retailer, they will always, or most retailers will have private labels.
Which is true, right? Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, you could walk into a DMart, you could walk into a Future Bazaar, you could walk into a Reliance, or the online grocers, Amazon. In the e-commerce space has their own private labels. In the grocery space, Big Basket, Gofers, we both have our own private labels. So private labels have always been there. I think it's a fine balance because everybody cannot afford to buy a certain brand. When you come in with a brand strategy, when you look at merchandising, for example, there is going to be, you're within a product type, you're going to have multiple types of products. There's going to be, P type 1, which is going to be about driving volume, which could be a national brand. Then there's going to be one which is going to be around image of your platform. What kind of products that you keep. Are you high end? Are you low end? Are you, mid end? And then there's always going to be a opening price point kind of product. So I think every product type, every category is going to have multiple kinds of products that you're going to stock for multiple consumers because you don't have the same economic strata, the same preference kind of person walk into your store. People have different choices. They have different economic, criteria that they need to take care of. So you will have multiple products, and private label is actually, one of those products that sits on a retailer's shelf. And helps the retailer, serve an audience which may not be interested in paying more money for the same kind of quality.
Brilliant, Bikram. Now, just on a quick housekeeping, I know we've sort of hit the hour marker. I'm going to take a couple of more questions. Bikram has kindly agreed to be here for another 5-10 minutes. But, we have our next in series of CI Delhi State webinars. And we're going to be talking with Talish Ray on managing HR and human resources. How do we deal with having to fire employees ethically, do it in the right way if we have to? How can people make sure that carriers are not impacted? What are the legal issues around this? And this is going to go very in depth into understanding. I have posted it on the chat, so you can see that. Please, register in advance. This is very, very interesting stuff. I've also posted my LinkedIn there. Please follow me. I will push out as soon as we get this entire recording on video, so you have that along with any meeting notes and things as well. So 2 last questions, Bikram, which I'm going to take up. One, which I thought was a very good one, from an anonymous attendee at that. Before COVID or after COVID, are we seeing a move to healthier stuff, less sugar, less fat, or I would think that, I know at least there is a joke that is going on that, Modi ji after, 15, 20 days of quarantine will instead of said that, mere pyare bhaiyon aur behnon will say mere pyare hathiyon, where all of us have pushed to that level. Were people eating healthier before, you think? Was it a trend, and have they stopped, or where's that going?
So pre-COVID, yes, there was we've already put a couple of private label items out there, or ranges, or categories out there around organic, pesticide free, and things like that. But I can tell you, in the COVID world, people are buying just about everything.
It's all over the place.
Everybody's buying everything. Everybody's eating everything. Your gluten intolerant people are suddenly eating regular atta because the gluten intolerant atta is not available.
More of a diet than a really.
So at this point, I can tell you, anything on the shelf is just flying off.
So whatever you can, and as you said, you're having trouble getting the deliveries also because the labor shortage, this, that, etc. So there is still a limitation. Last question, if this becomes the norm, if you're looking at a 3-month, 6-month, Henan in China, after China declared itself COVID free, just went on lockdown yesterday, right? So 600,000 people total lockdown of a place. And we've seen parts of India which are these high transmission hot zones, which will get locked down. In the UAE, they had to lock down an entire neighborhood on that, right? So as we see this lockdown coming in and out, maybe over the next 6 months, 1 year, do you see the Kirana store surviving this? I mean, this is hugely disrupting to them because, they don't have that much cash flow. I think most of them have, 15-day, 30-day cash flows. They're highly dependent on supply chains to them. Huge issues about personally going and buying and such. Are they going to recover from this as well? Or are you going to see this massive shift where a lot of people will say, okay, you know what, retail is down, and now we're just going to all move to e-commerce?
Look, I'll tell you my view of this, Aditya, is that, it's for a Kirana store to serve entire colonies. These typically, one Kirana, you'd have one or two Kirana stores or three maximum attached to a colony, right? Even where you stay, you'd probably have 3 or 4 Kirana stores. They just can't physically serve the entire population living there. It's just not possible. And if people are not moving around, you don't have an option of going from, let's say, Horse Khas to, Green Park, or maybe beyond to Safdarjung or to Greater Kailash to go pick up your goods. Supply chains are disrupted. So yes, the Kirana store will be able to serve, people in the vicinity, but supplies are limited. He can buy probably 30, 40, 50, he can stock 100 bags of atta. He can never, compare with the, 10,000, 50,000 bags of atta that lie in warehouses for e-commerce companies. So we think the normal is going to change. Will the Kirana store disappear? I don't think so. People will still want to buy, material from the Kirana store, but we think buying behavior will perhaps transition. You'll have a stock up, which will be towards the early part of the month, and then there will be top up, which can be done with your local Kirana store.
So if I'm out of biscuits and I'm having a tea party, I need to go to the Kirana, right? But let's say my basket of essentials, I'll try to, buy on a wider SKU, and then I said top up, small stuff that we need. That's an interesting perspective. But I'm glad that you think that Kirana stores are still going to be around. I think that's a huge source of employment for our country. It's a huge source of traders and small businesses.
Yeah, I don't see them shutting down. Not at all. I just think buying behavior will change. And I think we're talking of, if you just look at groceries as a business, it's like, last number I saw was some, couple of $1 trillion. So there's enough space, it's a big enough space. I think e-commerce will continue to gain foothold, modern trade will grow, and the Kiranas will also be there. They'll keep serving their, local communities.
Bikram, thank you so much. I know you have to run. I think all the customers here are hoping that you're able to push out their deliveries as well. Personally, I just want to thank all the attendees. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please join us for our entire webinar conference series throughout the month. It's a hard time for us all during this lockdown period. I'm very happy to see so many of you taking great leadership during this time. And please, everybody, stay safe, stay paranoid, but stay positive. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Adi. This was absolutely super. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you, Bikram. Bye.